Okay, good stuff. Thanks for that, Ruby. Yeah, so my name is Craig Dwyer. Would have met some of you before through the kind of the series of digital campaigning workshops that we done last year. And I also kind of, yeah, I've been doing some work with Youth Rise over the last kind of few months as well. And I think it was kind of like, through that kind of work and just through my own stuff, I've really been noticing how Instagram is becoming, a really important kind of like platform and a hub for kind of like activism and campaigning and movement building. So, I've been really just trying to kind of capture all of the lessons and the learnings and the best practices around that, and how we can maybe incorporate some of that into our own kind of like work as well. So that's very much kind of just the focus of the workshop this morning. So I've just put together a few slides based on that. We have about an hour this morning, but like feel free, let's kind of, we're a small enough group this morning, so feel free to kind of come in and share any experiences that you guys have as well. I think we can all kind of like learn from each other too. And also, if you do have any questions at any stage along the way, just feel free to ask, and I will answer them as we go along. All right. Oh, and it'd be handy if I started sharing my screen, which I'll. Okay, can you all see that? Great. There's still some people joining us. So those who just joined us, welcome. And we're just about to kick off. Just getting set up here. All right. Okay. So what are the objectives then for the session? So very much just like how can we get the most effective use out of Instagram for, in order to reach, engage, and influence the target audiences that we're working with. Then also just kind of like picking up on the latest trends kind of like in the sector and trying to keep up on top of those. And then kind of like throughout, I'll just be referring to different examples and best practice. Just hearing a little bit of feedback there. So if can you just mute your mic if you're not speaking, if that's all right. Thank you. Great. I think that's done now. Okay, so just kind of setting some context then, like why should we be using Instagram? Certainly as a platform, it's growing and growing at an exponential rate. So now over 1 billion people use Instagram every month. And the majority of users, so 70% are under the age of 35. So I suppose kind of like coincides a little bit with kind of like those who would be getting involved with kind of social causes and different movements as well, and I think that's kind of like why we're kind of seeing a rise in the type of activism and advocacy in the space as well, because I think those audiences are maybe using Facebook and Twitter to a lesser extent, and because like digital natives are becoming more active in the Instagram space. So we're kind of seeing that play out a little bit more on the platform. That's not to say that it isn't still happening on the other social media platforms, but just kind of like definitely the latest trends and seeing a lot more of it kind of taking place and a lot more kind of community building on Instagram. Kind of like gender split is pretty even. Excuse me. Users spend an average of 30 minutes per day on the app. So, they are kind of spending time there and, consuming a lot of content on Instagram. 500 million people use Instagram stories every day. So that's a key kind of feature on the platform, So people are spending a lot of time on Instagram stories. So people are also scrolling on their feeds, but then also the stories, it's a really kind of like important part of your strategy when thinking, how are we going to use, or like, are we going to use Instagram more? How are we going to use it? I think it's important to try and factor in as well to include stories within that. And we'll look at ways to do that as well. And then I suppose this is also kind of important for us as well, because 90% of Instagram users do follow like, like a business page. So like not a personal page, which was obviously, the type of page that we would all have kind of for our organizations. So that is important as well, so the majority of users are following those and, are interacting and consuming content from those pages too. And so this is just kind of like a look at, I think we're a pretty global audience kind of here today as well. So just there, the top kind of 15 countries based on like, million or monthly active users. So US coming out on top there, followed by India, Brazil, Indonesia, Russia, Turkey, Japan, all the way down to South Korea, rounding out the top 15 there. So you might see your country making an appearance. Okay, and I suppose when it comes to digital social media more kind of like broadly, the landscape is rapidly, constantly evolving, and there's like new platforms pop up. So there's kind of TikTok or Clubhouse now, there's always kind of like a new one, but also how audiences kind of interact and consume content on the platform. And that's kind of constantly changing as well, and I think like that presents a challenge as well, as just trying to stay on top of those kind of changing trends as much as possible. So we're going to look at that now a little bit in more detail. And we'll be referring to kind of social media a little bit more broadly, but trying to apply it as much as possible to Instagram as well. So the first one there, yeah, I think like one of the kind of trends that we are seeing with social media more broadly is that we're moving away from this kind of like larger kind of like broadcast approach to social media. So like on Facebook historically, you like post to your wall, you put up like photos, and we probably all have photos from like 10 or more years ago that we wish were not there anymore. But it's moving away from that kind of very public presence that kind of stayed there for a while, and it's moving to these kind of smaller groups and private conversations. So like on Facebook, even like that's Facebook groups, for example, but even like on Instagram, you'll have small groups of people who will have a conversation going in DMs, and people kind of sharing posts from feeds to their DM groups on Instagram, direct messages. So it's kind of, it's those more kind of smaller, more intimate, kind of like private conversations that we're seeing. That's the kind of the way that the trends are going and how audiences are interacting with each other on social media. Also kind of like algorithms, like the algorithms are always kind of like changing, and that's kind of something that's a bit of a headache to try and understand as well. But like with Instagram in particular, there have been recent changes to kind of like the algorithm and what Instagram deemed to be kind of like valuable engagements on the platform. So if you think of the types of engagements that you can take like on a post, right? So it's like whether you can like it or comment or share. You can share to your story, share to kind of somebody kind of in a direct message. And then also there's the bookmark where you can kind of save it and kind of view it later. And Instagram now kind of like rank those on kind of like, how kind of like valuable they are. So if you're, say, regularly posting content that people are bookmarking and that people are sharing to their stories, Instagram will say, oh yeah, well, when Youth Rise are putting out this type of content, it's getting this type of really good engagement. People are finding this, valuable and informative. Therefore, we're going to push these types of posts from Youth Rise further up in people's feeds. Whereas the other types of engagement, so just like the simple likes or comments, they're becoming kind of like less valuable, unfortunately. So if you're kind of putting up content that's kind of gets some likes but doesn't kind of get shares or saves, well then the like that doesn't work as well with the algorithm. And Instagram will say, okay, you know, people don't find this as informative or as valuable, and therefore you'll appear kind of further down in people's feeds. So it's kind of just worth keeping that in mind. And so the most kind of like valuable engagements on Instagram are the likes of the sharing and the bookmarking and the saving. And we'll look at kind of examples of content that works well for those kind of engagement types later on as well. Ephemeral content, that's just kind of like what stories is called. So Instagram stories is an example of ephemeral content. So that's content that, you know, doesn't last too long. It disappears after a period of time. So in the case of Instagram's kind of like it stays on your story for 24 hours and then it's gone unless you save it to your highlights. And I'll actually kind of, that kind of feeds into the next point there, the impact of new platforms. So that kind of ephemeral content, the stories feature, was something that started on Snapchat, you know, and that was the kind of the key difference with Snapchat. But you can see how that then impacted on Instagram, and they were like, oh, you know, well, we're going to take this feature and incorporate it into our platform. You know, and I think that really worked against kind of like Snapchat as a platform, because a lot of people then just started using that feature on Instagram. And I think we're kind of seeing that now even with TikTok. So again, you know, we had the TikTok appear, kind of huge rise, lots of audiences flocking to that platform. And Instagram then were like, oh, here, we want some of this. So now they've introduced this kind of like Reels kind of feature, where they're just trying to I suppose kind of monopolize on that kind of like latest trend as well, you know. So I think we're still in early stages there. I don't think like audiences are kind of using Reels in the way that they kind of like using TikTok still, but you know, that's not to say that it won't happen, but I'm skeptical at the moment. So it's a kind of, it's a wait and see as to how much Reels take off on Instagram. And then just kind of the final point then here is around kind of like caption length on Instagram. And it kind of, Instagram books the trend a little bit here, you know. So like on the likes of Twitter, obviously you're limited in your characters, so to 280 per tweet. But with Instagram, kind of like research would suggest that tweets with longer captions actually get higher engagement, you know, which I think kind of presents like a really good opportunity to, especially kind of around storytelling. You know, you have kind of more space to tell more of a story in your captions. So you can see now, like in up to 2020, the average kind of caption is 405 characters, which is around 65 to 70 words. So, you know, and people are reading them and they are consuming them, you know, so you have more space to tell a bit more of a story there. So yeah, also look, we kind of mentioned kind of just the importance of Instagram stories as well, you know, and this is not just a feature of Instagram, as we were saying, it is on the other kind of like social media platforms as well. But kind of like really Instagram is the predominant one when it comes to stories. So I'm just going to go through a couple of examples of how to maybe potentially use kind of like stories as part of your kind of communications plans and strategies. Okay. And especially looking at they have like key engagement features even within the stories, you know, where you can ask questions, you can run polls, you can do quizzes. So they are ways of really kind of bringing in your audiences and really kind of facilitating that engagement with people. So with these examples, like I haven't kind of looked at kind of harm reduction or drug policy in particular, but hopefully what these kind of illustrative examples will do is even just kind of help get you thinking in relation to your own work, how we might be able to kind of, you know, take inspiration from some of these examples and apply them in your own work. You know, and I suppose maybe just thinking about what have you coming up over the next 3 to 6 months in terms of maybe like, events or like reports, launch, anything like that. And thinking, okay, well, when it comes to that event or that report launch, is there something that we can do here with this type of content? Okay so far? Cool. So the first example here is this is just from a mental health charity in the UK called Mind. Okay, and I think that especially kind of like during the pandemic, they've been using Instagram and stories very effectively to promote obviously all of kind of like the services and awareness raising that they do around kind of like the importance of minding your mental health, but also kind of like really providing that support and bringing in audiences on the platform as well. So here you can see, so this is one of those engagement features that I'm talking about where you can ask a question. So this is kind of like 3 different stories in their Instagram story. So in the first one here, they're like, have you got a question for us, about managing your mental health or supporting others with theirs during lockdown? And they have one of their team kind of like on hand to answer those questions. Okay. So then people come on, they see this, they put in their question, and then in each subsequent story, they have that person then is actually answering those questions, so providing that kind of like relevant, informative content for their audiences. So, I don't know, you'll know best about kind of like where this might apply in the work that you're doing, but this could have been like something around kind of like COVID-19 and people who use drugs, or, those kinds of questions. Are those opportunities there, and again, just doing it where it is kind of like relevant and appropriate and sensitive to the work that you're doing. So user generated content is also like great when it comes to social media. So trying to encourage kind of like others to kind of send you in content that you can kind of use on your own platform. So here is an example as well from Mind, where they were asking people to look share in with this kind of crafternoon, and where they look at inviting people like sharing your photos of you getting involved in this, and then they repost them on their stories out. So again, it's just kind of it's showcasing the work that their kind of like members and audiences are doing, and it gives them kind of like content to work with as well. So again, kind of very different from like harm reduction and drug policy, but I wanted to include this example from the Dogs Trust in Ireland, for the reason that every year in Ireland we have like the social media awards, and the Dogs Trust, they like win loads of awards every year for their social media. So they do it very well. But specifically, I think I wanted to just show how they use kind of stories in a way. So they do kind of feature all of kind of like the services that they have on offer, and raising awareness. But this, I think, is a good example here where they use the quiz feature through Instagram stories to try and educate and inform people around the issues around puppy farms. So in this first kind of like story here, it's like, here we're on, do you know about what happens when it comes to doggy farms? Take our quiz. So then, they pose the question. So in this case, is like, which one of these looks like a puppy farm? People vote. And then on the next slide, then it's like, it's explaining, giving the answer and explaining. And this was just kind of like one question. I think they had kind of like 10 or so. So it's an engaging way of kind of bringing audiences in, but then also like informing and educating and raising awareness around kind of like an important objective for the work, in this case, that the Dogs Trust are doing, So again, it's maybe just trying to think of this in relation to your own work, and if and when kind of like those opportunities may arise. And I'm not saying that it's going to be like a weekly thing, yeah, but it's it's just might be thinking of key moments or opportunities over the next while, and is there scope to do like a quiz like this, or have that kind of question box, and even just kind of like trying and testing it and seeing how it works and what type of responses that you do get from your audiences. Does anyone have any questions on that so far, or has anyone kind of been experimenting with stories on their own kind of like Instagram? I want to share any examples. Florencia?
Thank you. Yes. How many stories do you have to upload by the during the day? I mean, because sometimes it seems like um, you can post too many stories, and then it's like I am not going to watch it. So, do you recommend like a a specific number of stories that you can upload? Or have?
I don't have a specific number, right? But what I would say is like it is important that you do also kind of like, so if you're trying this approach, right, and you're posting different stories, keeping an eye on your analytics as well is really important, because when you go into your analytics for Instagram stories, you can see when people dropped out. So say if you had 10 stories up during the day and you can see, well, the majority of people actually dropped off after number 5, well, then okay, well, we might reduce it then, reduce the number to 5 the next day or the next week, and then you see, oh yeah, people watched kind of for the whole story. That's a kind of a good number. So use that to kind of help inform. And it might depend on also what you're doing. So if you're just kind of like updating, from an event or something like that, it might be 4 or 5. But if you're doing a quiz and you have 9 or 10 questions, I wouldn't limit it to 5. I keep it to the 10 if you have 10 good, engaging questions. So so the two things in there is, one, kind of just be led by the content, as long as it's kind of engaging and informative, keep going. And then two, just keep an eye on your analytics and see kind of like when people start to drop off from watching the stories. Okay. Any other questions at this stage? All right. So yeah, whilst kind of like I'm a big fan of stories, it's not the only content type on Instagram as well. So here's kind of some research done around kind of like the posts on kind of like your main Instagram feed, and the different kind of options there. So you can have just a regular single image or video, or a carousel. So carousel is when you can upload up to 10 images or video in the one post, and you scroll through them. And actually, so the research would suggest that carousels actually get a lot more engagement than single images or single videos as well. And for me, I think like this is really where kind of I see this in the carousels is where I see kind of like this kind of space for kind of activism, and movement building has been playing out in particular. And I think it has been like, certainly seen a rise over the last year or so now with the pandemic, but also kind of, the are also kind of like social movements that have kind of taken place during the pandemic, such as kind of like, the resurgence of Black Lives Matter. And so we're starting to see kind of like activism resources and real informative content to try and help to drive action around those. So just kind of like some examples of that. Um, yeah, like I'm seeing a lot of these kind of like resource guides. So like, here's how to help, here's how to get involved. So this is what you can do. Or in this second case here are 50 books by Black authors that you can read. So it's all this kind of like trying to facilitate and drive kind of action and awareness. And these are the types. So these are carousels in that. So here's how to help. Scroll across to find out how to help. Here's 50 books by Black authors. Scroll across to find out what those 50 books are. And, so we were talking earlier about the kind of the algorithms and the changes in kind of like what's the most engaging content and the bookmarking. These are the types of posts that people bookmark and they save for later. And you can see even in that first one, the how to help, there is a little bookmark. So they're kind of prompting people to save this for later. And even so, just that example there of the 50 books by Black authors, that Instagram account that posted it, Bad Form Review, they gained 6,000 followers overnight on the back of this list, and the post was saved or was bookmarked 40,000 times. Yeah, and this is kind of like a wider trend that I'm seeing, and I don't know if any of you follow or have seen this account, but it's called So You Want to Talk About, and they post purely just these kind of resource guides in that kind of carousel format where they're talking about kind of like different topics and different issues, all in the kind of social issue, social change space. And so you can see just examples of those there. So you want to talk about getting involved in politics. So you want to talk about fake news. So you want to talk about Trump's first term failures. And then, you scroll through for more information. So just taking one of those, for example, getting involved in politics. So that's a carousel. And then on each tile, you have more information. And so you want to get involved in the conversation. So you want to take action online, take action offline, get involved in local politics, and so on. Okay, so again, kind of like, thinking about this in relation to your own work, are there kind of like opportunities here where, you might be able to kind of put together kind of some of these kind of types of resource guides? And again, it doesn't have to be kind of every week or something like that, but it's just thinking about kind of like what you have coming up over the next while. And is this a good way of kind of like repackaging a report or, something that you're working on, repackaging it and reforming it into something like this that is going to engage audiences. So say if it was like, like a report, rather than just kind of say posting an image of the front cover of the report to your Instagram and saying, go to our website where you can kind of like read this, can you actually like, just pull out some of the key information and present it in this type of format that's going to be a lot more like engaging and informative for audiences, but it'll help you to grow your Instagram kind of following as well, um and this is something that kind of like I'm seeing a lot of. Actually, I'm just going to kind of skip ahead here for a minute, so I'll come back to these slides. But this is something that like I actually wanted to put to test myself. And so I actually do some work with Women for Election here in Ireland. So they are like an NGO. It's all about encouraging, supporting more women to get involved in politics. And so they were recently running a campaign school, but it was like a training, and they were trying to recruit women to attend that. So I was thinking, okay, so rather than just kind of like posting a promo graphic for the campaign school on Instagram and asking people to sign up, it's like, can I turn this into this kind of like carousel type post that is going to be a little bit more informative and engaging and bring in people a little bit more. So instead, you can see then so instead of just posting that last tile, the sixth one there, which is like the promo graphic, I actually turned it into this kind of like longer post here. The first one in that series. So have you ever thought about getting involved in politics? Here's why you should and how. Okay, so that's kind of trying to hook people in. And then you're like, oh yeah, okay, well, why should I know and how should I? So then you kind of scroll across and you have that arrow to kind of prompt people to scroll across. And then you find out the different reasons why you should think about getting involved in politics. Less than a quarter of MPs in our parliament are women, and all of the issues and so on. And then you get to the last one is like, okay, now you know why, and here's how. And then you like prompting people to sign up. And So I can't remember like the exact numbers now, but like this was actually the second best performing post on Women for Elections Instagram since the account has been set up. The first one was this kind of like viral one when Kamala Harris was elected VP. So outside of that, this one was like really, really like engaging, and more specifically, it was bookmarked loads and loads of times. So it did kind of like it what I kind of was hoping and expecting would happen did happen, you know, and it brought in a lot of new organic followers as well. And then just going back to that Mind Mental Health charity that we looked at, you know, this is another example of a carousel post that they had, where, you know, one of the issues that they're talking about is like money and mental health. And then you scroll through and you find out more information about that. And I suppose kind of one of the reasons why I'm showing this one as well, like they don't have to be very kind of well produced, you know, and kind of like slick, professional, like, you know, they can be standard enough, and but just, you know, they're still informative and getting your kind of key messages out there. And actually just with this one, like I created this on Canva. I am not a graphic designer, but like, you know, I use Canva just to make this. So I don't know if how many of you are kind of familiar with Canva, you know, but it can be easy enough to create this type of content there. Okay, so flying back here now. So this is another example of a similar type of content, but using kind of more graphics. So this is actually from Campaign Zero. So they've kind of like 8 different policies to help kind of end gun violence in the US. Okay, so in the first one you have kind of like an overview of the 8, but then when you scroll through, you have a little bit more information about the 8 different policies. Okay, so again, just to try and get the kind of creative juices flowing and thinking about kind of maybe ways of talking about harm reduction and drug policy in a kind of a different and engaging kind of format. So I suppose like whilst all of those kind of examples that we have been looking at so far use kind of primarily text and graphics to relay kind of like data and information, you know, we're also seeing kind of like Instagram is kind of primarily visual as well. And so we're kind of seeing examples of kind of artwork and this kind of comic kind of feature being used on the platform as well. And this is actually from an Irish illustrator called Pan Cook. So during kind of like Black Lives Matter last year, he started telling the stories of Black people who've been killed by like violent acts of racism and police brutality in this type of form. And like just kind of exploded on Instagram, really prominent, being shared by really kind of like high profile influential people, you know. But I think just kind of like a really good way even just to kind of like thinking about how to tell stories and how to tell people's stories in a kind of a more engaging a format on the platform as well. Still admitting people here, which is great. So I actually was recently working on a campaign here around kind of like social media and disinformation and freedom of expression. And we worked with Pan Cook to create a comic strip in a carousel format on Instagram. And it was just really like worked kind of so well. Now we were at the benefit that, you know, we were able to kind of use his platform to kind of share this message. But like the comic had over 22,000 likes and it reached 157,000 people. You know, and it was just such a brilliant kind of moment for the campaign to be able to tell the story and raise the awareness kind of like in this way. But I think it also just demonstrates how this type of content does really work and engages audiences. Okay, we looked at those. And just another example kind of from that campaign as well. You know, so again, we were using this type of carousel format just to illustrate different topics and different issues related to the campaign. And it just draws people in a little bit more. I do think it's important, as I was mentioned with the stories earlier, you know, if we are going to be maybe investing more kind of like resources of time in Instagram moving forward, I think it is important as well that we try and measure performance along the way. And see kind of like how you are getting on. So keeping an eye on your analytics, you know, you can see kind of like just the growth in your followers, where your audiences are coming from, what time of the day they're most active, which is important, you know. So if there is a time that people are more active, posting at that time probably makes more sense. But then also just to kind of see, you know, what are the top posts and what is getting the most engagement. So you can look back on your posts by reach over the past year, and you can see, okay, well, yeah, okay, well, now look, we can see that when we start posting these types of kind of resource guides on carousels, they actually are getting lots of engagement. So let's maybe try and do a little bit more of that. Or similarly, you might find that they're not, which I'd be surprised about. But you know, you won't know unless you keep an eye on your analytics and see how your posts are performing. So you can look at it for your posts in your feed, but also in your stories as well, and seeing kind of like when people did exit or stay. Before we move on to kind of just some tips and tools, any kind of questions around any of the kind of the content pieces so far? Are we all good? Does anyone have any examples from their own work of where they have used Instagram kind of effectively, or they, you know, something didn't work? No? All right. Cool. So look, we have about 20 minutes left, which are probably a little bit ahead of schedule actually, but just kind of like want to look at some kind of tips and tools to help us if we are going to be using Instagram a little bit more. So the first kind of like 3 there are tools which are great kind of for scheduling, look some analytics, and also kind of like some insights as well. So the main kind of like platform for Instagram would be Later. You know, it is kind of predominantly geared towards Instagram. You can schedule posts and stories through the platform. They give you a lot of kind of like analytics as well, but also they've got a really helpful blog section that they regularly update. So if, you know, if you're looking to kind of keep up on top of the latest trends and how to use Instagram kind of most effectively, their blog section is actually quite good for that. So sorry, I probably should mention as well, you know, I will be following this session up with a kind of like a best practice guide, which will cover all of this information, but I'll also include all of these tools in that as well. Hootsuite, which some of you might be familiar with as well. So it's also quite good for scheduling content, but they also have a really good blog as well, which is kind of useful for just like more general trends around social media, but they do a lot of stuff on Instagram as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Are these free?
Yes. Yeah. They have free versions. So yeah, and I like it. I've only ever kind of used the free versions on them, and they're all good. Similarly with kind of like Annalisa there, that's a kind of a free platform that does give you some top level analytics as well. And where this is useful is you can actually get analytics for other accounts. So say you wanted, you know, there's other kind of like organizations in the kind of harm reduction space and you want to see how they're doing, you can actually put their Instagram handle into Annalisa and it'll show you their top 3 posts or whatever, you know. So even just to kind of take a look at that and see, well, what's working well for them, and kind of like learning from others and taking inspiration from that. And then, so just the next 3 then are more kind of like around creating the content. So I mentioned Canva already. Some of you might be familiar with that. So with Canva, there is kind of a free and a premium version. The premium version is available for free to registered nonprofits. So I don't like, if that's something that you're interested in, just Google Canva for nonprofits, and there's a form that you can fill out, and there's usually a very quick turnaround time for that. But what I really like about Canva as well is just that they have kind of like templates already kind of like for you. So here, you know, you can kind of just click into Instagram story, and there's absolutely kind of like tons there that you kind of start, you know, so you're not starting from scratch. You can take one of these templates and just kind of like start building from there, you know. And Canva is changing now a little bit, is that they're starting to include kind of more animated type of content as well. So this is an example of one, not moving for me now, but like, you know, so you can actually kind of create short videos and not just kind of like static posts as well. Okay. So Canva, definitely worth checking out. And one thing that I really like about Canva as well is, see this kind of like learn section. They also like, they have different, if you have the time and you wanted to use this more, they've got great kind of like tutorials and guides on how to use kind of like Canva most effectively as well. So the next one here is Kapwing. Don't know if any of you heard of Kapwing. So there's, again, kind of a free version of this. There's lots of kind of like different tools that they have here, like a video editor, or adding subtitles to videos, for example, or like a meme generator. So all of these kind of like meme templates and stuff, but also just for Instagram stories, they've got lots of templates there that you can kind of like choose from as well. Just again, to kind of make them make them stand out a little bit more engaging. Okay. And then the last one that I have here is called InVideo. So this is one that I've just kind of come across more recently. And it's really great. And I think this is one of the really big benefits of kind of like the growth in digital and social media. Is I think like gone are the days where you had to be kind of like, you know, a videographer or a graphic designer to actually be able to kind of create some of this content. You know, you don't have to be very skilled in Adobe or Illustrator to kind of create some of this stuff. New tools are always kind of like coming out that are helping us to do this ourselves, you know. And I think InVideo is a good one. Again, they've just like lots of different templates here that you can choose from. The only caveat with this is that it's not free. They've a free 14-day trial, okay? But then after that, it's $10 a month. So still not a massive cost. But so if this is something maybe that you're thinking of, maybe it's worth kind of like checking out the 14-day free trial and then kind of seeing and maybe kind of building a case then for like investing in and moving forward. But that's kind of for you to kind of have a look at. But like loads and loads and loads that you can kind of like choose from there as well. Okay. So with all of this kind of these tools now, I'm looking forward to watching all of your Instagrams and seeing all of these lovely videos and carousel posts that you're all going to be posting. So that kind of is the end of my presentation. It's going to stop sharing my screen. And if anyone has any questions, please do feel free to ask them. But also, like, I was just going to ask, like, you know, as I was kind of going through the presentation there, excuse me, and the different kind of types of content, were you even kind of able to think of things that are coming up in the context of your own work and how you might be able to utilize some of this content a little bit more? Or were you thinking, no, like that's, you know, you can't really see how we can, you know, use quizzes or polls or...
Can I say something?
Yes.
I think for me, for my work, is the most important is to create contents. And that it's, well, for me, it's difficult because I am here alone managing all the social networks and how to say, doing the project, no, like the executive tasks. So I don't know if there any suggestion or recommendation that you can give me to how to say, like do more content without leaving another task behind, no? Because I am one person, I feel like octopus doing everything. So if you go now into my Instagram project, I feel so embarrassing because it's not good, but because it took take too much time to create content, to reply all the answers that people give, make you, and everything. So I don't know if you have a tip or recommendation for me to manage this better.
That's a really good question. And it is kind of something that I'm conscious of, because I do kind of like a lot of work in the space, and and often is the case that like this is a job on top of 10, 20 other jobs that people have. Resources are already quite stretched, and this is kind of something else to do. So kind of very, very aware of that. The one thing that I will kind of say is like, just like if we can try and like plan a little bit more, it does kind of help to take out some of the resourcing, so it's kind of like, even if you think, okay, at the end of April or the start of May, we have this kind of event or this activity. Thank you, Ruby. See you later. So thinking at this stage, what kind of content could we develop for Instagram to help to really promote and amplify that? And then over the next kind of like while, if you do have bits of time, at least you kind of like know what you're working towards. Whereas if you kind of wait until it comes to the time itself, like so at the start of May, then it's kind of like, oh no, I don't have time for this because of everything else happening with the event. And so it's just trying to kind of like plan as much in advance as possible. And then kind of like, even if you can, it's kind of scheduling content then, just to go out. And also try and create like templates on Canva, so like then if it's a case of you're not kind of like creating something new each time, but it's a case of just going in and maybe tweaking and changing the text, but the design and the look is still there, and that work is done. So I'd say like planning, scheduling, and creating templates.
And I have another question.
Go ahead.
How to not repeat content? For example, I am working on harm reduction and drug use with teenagers and universitarians, but I also youth rights are doing it with youth, right? How can we do more synergies and not repeat a lot the same message? No, because sometimes it seems like all my accounts that I follow about harm reduction or sexualities or feminism, it's saying the same all the time. So it seems like it gets some, I don't know, maybe the engagement gets lower because another account already said that. So it's something that you have to be the first all the time to publish something interesting or capture your attention, because you are in competition somehow with another account that are saying the same. So that is something that
well, okay, so maybe try and answer that in a couple of ways. So like, one is just like, can you say it a little bit differently, but like in a different kind of like way that elicits more engagement. So like what somebody else has said, can you actually pose that as a question or do a poll in your stories, where you're kind of like bringing people in a little bit more, so it's different and it's more engaging, you're bringing your audiences in. And then also I'd say, yeah, just trying to think of maybe how it can be framed in different ways. And I'll give an example from like Women for Election again. So they recently produced a new report. It was on it was experiences and interviews with women who had run for election in Ireland. And so I kind of wanted to continue to promote the report, was like, you know, just trying to do it in different ways. So what I did in that case was like kind of created templates for Instagram stories, but then changed out the content. So I put in different quotes from the interviews and different statistics and different findings. And so I like, so instead of just like, here's the cover of the report, I then had like 10 different graphics with different pieces of information. And then over like a 2-week period, I just at regular intervals, I posted the different pieces of information from, so it was still talking about the same report, but it was like different piece of content each time.
Okay, good. Thank you. And the last question, I'm sorry.
Okay.
What about hashtags? I
Yeah.
don't understand what is the goal of hashtags.
So hashtags actually are important enough on Instagram, because I think people do follow them. You know, it's harder on Instagram than on other platforms to be discovered organically by new audience and to grow your followers organically. But one, like, the best way to do that is when people share your posts to their stories. But I think another good way is actually through hashtags. So if people are searching hashtag harm reduction, and then they might see your content there. So I do think it is useful, excuse me, to include hashtags under your posts. But I think it's about doing a little bit of research, going to base like on your own work, and what are the hashtags that our people are using and following, and including those.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, is it Leji?
Yeah, it's me. Hi.
Hi.
Firstly, thank you so much for the nice workshop. I was wondering if the organization is organizing some of the media campaign, or like maybe based on Instagram. Is it better to create a new account, or are we better to use the same one, or the main account of the organization?
So which, do you have an account for your own organization at the moment?
Yeah, for example, it's a country-based organization, but then so usually we have an Instagram account, but then we're doing what was the name? Get Hard, Get Safe campaign, and then we created another Instagram account at the same time, new website for it, but then I was realizing it was a little bit mistake for us to doing the new one for reaching out the target population.
So yeah, no, I would like, so rather than kind of setting up campaign specific kind of like accounts, I would use the main organization account. Is that am I kind of hearing you correctly? So rather than kind of like setting up a new account for like a campaign, I would use the main organization account for that. Did I understand?
Thank you.
No worries. Any other questions?
Hello, Craig. How you doing? Thanks for a comprehensive workshop.
No worries.
Hello.
Oh, terrible. You dropped out there. Try again.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. So yes. Thanks for a comprehensive workshop. Well, I just need say your advice, on some key issues, particularly with our Instagram as an organization. We did an audit of our social media platforms last year, and the one thing that we realized was that, of course, on Instagram we're getting some form of engagement, but the engagements, do not translate to following. You know, so many times, right, you have, you know, yes, people view and stuff, but, you know, in many cases, they don't even like. You know, yes, they view, but they don't like. And at the same time, you know, those that like don't also follow, right? So it's growing, you know, our following on Instagram for a while. And also, I mean, looking at the demography of Instagram users, I mean, yes, mostly below 35, we work in a hostile environment, right? And also, I mean, we went to drug policy, which to a large extent, you know, could be considered to be a boring topic, you know, to many young people. So how do we strike that balance? I mean, having our engagement on how to achieve that.
Okay, thanks. You were just kind of dropping in and out there a little bit towards the end, but I think
yeah,
no, it's okay. I think I got the gist of it. I think so for the first kind of like part of your question, just in terms of the engagement piece, yeah, like I think what you need to try and achieve is kind of like a consistent level of engagement. You know, so say if you're kind of like regularly posting content that people are kind of like sharing to their stories, or you know that they are saving, then you will kind of like start to see an increase in engagement and following then on the back of that, you know. But if it's kind of, if it's a bit hit and miss in terms of kind of like just how many engagements your posts are getting, that's not likely going to translate into as much of a following as you would like, you know. So I think it'd be just trying to ensure kind of consistency in your output, trying these different types of posts, and seeing what ones work the best, doing more of that, and then hopefully that will translate into more followers as well. But like, and I think remembering as well that like engagement in and of itself is a good metric, you know. So if you're finding that like, yeah, look, loads of people kind of shared this post and loads of people saved it, like that's good. If it doesn't always kind of translate into followers, that's okay too. You know, the engagement is good because it still means that your content is being seen and the reach of it is still kind of like, is still great, and it's still kind of getting in front of new audiences. And then, so sorry, just like, can you remind me what the second part of your question was then?
I think you already gave a response to the two questions. Basically, around content generation, you know, I mean, given that, yes, well, went to drug policy, which is mostly considered a boring topic, you know, for many young people, right? We're mostly on Instagram. So, you know, we've, in recent times, or should I say over the years, we've had an issue with, you know, balancing our content. Yeah. You know, not to sound too serious, but I mean, drug policy is serious, right? So do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, no, it is serious, but I don't think it's necessarily boring. You know, I think what you know, what audiences are looking for on social media, kind of like one of two things. So, you know, either to be kind of like entertained or informed. And you're in the kind of like informing in space, you know? So I think like it's just thinking about how you can communicate your messages in a different way. So it's not kind of like, you know, just kind of speaking in the kind of like, say, policy language, but it's just actually kind of repackaging that content in a little bit of a more engaging kind of way for audiences through the likes of those kind of polls or quizzes, or, you know, those, so you want to talk about like harm reduction and young people, you know, and just posting it, like, you know, talking about it in that way that makes it a little bit more engaging for audiences, I think is important, you know, because it's not boring, it is information, but it's just in communicating it in a way that engages them and that they understand.
I think it's work. Yeah.
All right. So we might wrap it up there. So thank you very much for your kind of attention and engagement this morning. I hopefully that you found it useful. As I said, I will be following up with kind of like a guide. So that will have all of the information from the slides and all of the tools. So you'll have all of that there. And yeah, so the best of luck over the next while. You know, and I look forward to seeing all of your content coming out on Instagram.
Thank you very much, Craig. And thank you everyone who attended, and have a great weekend to all of you. And we'll follow up with the video and the resources.
Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.